Well, good morning, good day, good evening, good afternoon for everybody. Welcome to this Asian Evaluation Week, the first virtual Asian Evaluation Week that we have ever organized. So we hope that it will be going smoothly, and we also hope for your understanding if it doesn't. But I'm very happy to see that there are participants from all over joining us today. And we have distinguished panelists also that I will introduce to you a little bit later. I would also like to highlight that you can use the hashtag AEW2020 if you want to share your experience of this Asian Evaluation Week. Today for this session, we will talk about the use of artificial intelligence to unlock evaluation lessons. And we will be showcasing the EVA initiative in ADB, which is actually a platform that we are developing, and that will be a start for a discussion with our panelists and with participants on the use of new technology to unlock lessons from evaluation for better development effectiveness. But let me start by highlighting the importance of knowledge in our complex world. You know, a lot has been written and said about strengthening the role of MDBs, multilateral development banks like ADB, as knowledge solution institutions. So ADB wants to become even more of a knowledge bank, to continue to be relevant. And that's true in Asia and the Pacific, and I'm sure it's true in other continents. So an evaluation report that was recently released by IED, titled Knowledge Solutions for Development, an evaluation of ADB's readiness for its strategy 2030, highlight the fact that rapid changes in Asia and the Pacific have transformed economies, lifted millions out of poverty, unfortunately, with some drawbacks with this current crisis. But all of this has created also new and more complex development challenges that require not only finance or money, but also knowledge solutions. So all of us in MDBs need to bring much more than money. We need also to bring knowledge. And this COVID crisis that we are all living in reminds us of the need for innovative, knowledge-based solution to such complexity. It also reminds us that learning from evidence is very important. We need to know in a timely manner what works and what doesn't work. And evaluation has a role to play in that. So what is the role of evaluation in this quest for developing, capturing, storing, sharing, and hopefully using knowledge? Well, first, I would say that evaluation units are uniquely placed to play an important role in producing evidence-based quality evaluation knowledge that can contribute to high quality operation, enhanced capacity of countries, and better development results. We all say very often that evaluation is about accountability, but we also say that it's not just accountability, it's also very much about learning, about providing evidence of what works and what doesn't work. And we have all of these evaluation findings, lessons, recommendations, and they can play a very important role in enhancing development effectiveness. But for that, they need to be accessible, and not only need to be accessible, but they need to be used by the users, by our colleagues in operation, by countries, by decision makers. And this requires efforts on both sides, the side of the evaluators and the side of the users of evaluation. So this is why we need something like EVA, and of course other technologies. But EVA is a platform that we are still developing, but that's using cognitive search or artificial intelligence to scan through thousands of pages of evaluation reports and to extract evidence-based lessons from these reports. So this evidence-based information from evaluation can be better integrated in the feedback loop for improved project policy and policies. So the vision is to make evaluation knowledge more accessible, easier to use by development practitioners, by governments, by decision makers, and for the lessons to fit into projects, policies, programs for better development effectiveness. You may have watched the video that we sent you in advance. It's a video that encapsulates actually what EVA is about, but my colleagues, Kadra and Mike, will tell you more about EVA in a moment. And they will show you how to use the use of artificial intelligence is going to go just beyond just creating a database of lessons identified, but it will be actually extracting lessons from pages that are not necessarily labeled as lessons. So, but before that, I would like to highlight the fact that EVA will not have been possible without a very close relationship, very fruitful collaboration with ADB's IT department. Kadra is from this IT department. And we had a very strong support of the ADB Sandbox Initiative, which is a great initiative in ADB financing innovative projects using new technologies. So it's not just an evaluation department initiative, it is definitely a corporate ADB initiative. And that's really important because that's really what will contribute to make hopefully EVA a success. We need to have ownership of the whole institution. So this is the first time we use IE, artificial intelligence to make evaluation lessons more accessible. We are pioneering this use of IA for evaluation lessons, but I want to highlight that it's still work in progress. We are still working on it. We're still in the pilot phase. So any feedback from all of you will be very useful, and comments from our panelists will be also important. So we are convinced that EVA has the potential to be a game changer, is making evaluation knowledge more influential. But I will ask now my colleagues, Mike and Kadra, to present EVA and convince you of this potential. So it's to you now, first Mike, and then Kadra for a demo. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronique, and pleased to be here. And thank you also to our participants who signed up for this session. Thank you for your interest. I hope you're all doing well and fine. So before I start, let me just share a link. Veronique mentioned about the video that we did some time ago. So I'm sharing the link in the chat box. So I hope you'll take some time to watch it, and maybe after this session. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm sure many of our colleagues here and participants can relate to our situation, that finding valuable insights from tons of documents within the organization is difficult and time-consuming. In ADB, just to give you an example, we have many different systems that are actually very good in its intent and design. For example, one could be dealing with project information, one on consultant recruitment, one on disbursement and performance, and so on. The concern mainly is on its integration, as well as in providing one single authoritative truth. Similarly, if I am doing a search on our internal system, most of the information that would appear is somehow not the one that I'm looking for or is not relevant. Now, many of our internal documents, presentations, and contents are buried in repositories that are not much used. And a whole lot of knowledge came into the presentation of these materials. Rarely that we take a step back and mine this knowledge. We somehow want to create our own experience, which is good, but also we can learn from the experience of others. Before I proceed to the next slide, I would like to ask our participants for a quick poll on what do they think as the biggest challenge in managing knowledge in your organization. So I'm launching the poll now. I hope you can take some time to vote, maybe in around 10 seconds. So you can see now the result of the poll. Let me just So around 60%, the biggest concern, they say, that's encouraging people to share their knowledge. So 20%, it's for finding, easy finding for what they're looking for, and another 20% on collaboration and among team members. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So before talking about the things that we want to achieve, can we go to the next slide? So I'd like to point you first to this source of evaluation knowledge in ADB, which we call the Evaluation Information System, or EBIS. You might want to browse it at lessons.adb.org. It's an online publicly accessible database. So in this EBIS, we manually capture the lessons from evaluation reports, rewrite them, create tags for them, and put them in this online database. So the current system has been improved, but much limitation in terms of its relevance as well as its results and usefulness. So with this system, EVA, so we're taking out that manual process of capturing, rewriting, and tagging the lessons, and allowing the AI machine to do that for us. So we foresee that this will be the new generation. So with EVA, we would have that central repository of evaluation lessons for easy access. It will also increase the substrate of lessons from evaluation knowledge, and we hope that this would provide value addition to ADB's operation. Next slide, please. Next slide. So in the realm of artificial intelligence, we are using what we call cognitive search combined with natural language processing, or NLP, and machine learning for EVA to ingest, understand, organize, and query digital content from multiple data sources. Now, a whole lot of literature has been emerging regarding this technology, but let me quickly discuss the concepts about them. So the cognitive search that enables the discovery of intent of the users by deriving the context and insights from conceptual data. So many of you would have probably interacted with chat robots and would be amazed about how was he able to respond to my queries. How did he know what I mean? So this kind of platform is beginning to gain ground in customer service, in hospitality industry, in the industry such as hotels and airlines. Now, if this is applied to an organization, this can actually impact on the knowledge discovery, as well as this would lead to an improved productivity and better service to the organization. Now, the NLP, it's used to understand unstructured data from text, such as your emails, documents, and researches, as well as also rich data content such as videos and recordings. So it understands the human language and is also fine-tuned by the use of linguistics. So this NLP would understand what makes a cat cat and what are the characteristics that makes a cat cat. And you can also say there, the many ways how to skin a cat. Now, with machine learning, so the machine can continuously learn and adapt as more data becomes available. Another example is your Google search engine. So before you even finish typing what you're supposed to search, Google actually suggests you search terms, which is quite amazing, I would say. So the machine learns on your behavior and provides you with options and suggestions. So these three elements, cognitive search, NLP, and machine learning, they form part of the AI engine that we are using for EVA. Next slide, please. If we can, to illustrate this better, at your lower left, I'm not sure if the screen is already projecting, but just to mention that in terms of how information systems have been evolving through time, you see at your lower left is your traditional keyword search system. So this is highly dependent on indexing or tagging. So if the tags have not been made, most likely that you will not find the results, what you're looking for. Now, the second stage is semantic search, where the NLP component is added. This is similar to the chat box example that I mentioned earlier. Now, at the third stage is your contextual search, where the machine learning component is added. And this is where an example of this is your e-commerce sites, such as Amazon, where they provide you with more option on the things to buy based on your behavior and web patterns. For example, if you're looking for a tripod for your camera, Amazon or some online shop would suggest you other things like accessories, cables, etc. Now, at the higher end of this illustration is cognitive search, which is this is where humans can interact with computers and ask questions. So, for example, in the medical field, where this technology is actually gaining ground, doctors can ask the AI machine, what is the possible diagnosis given this set of X-ray images? And doctors have been quite amazed as well that the results has been astonishingly accurate. So this is similar to what we've been trying to achieve with EVA. Now, at the far end is your future looking at the neural lace technology. So to those of you who are somehow about my age should probably know the movie Matrix by Keanu Reeves, where human brains are merged or connected with computer. Now, I will quickly stop here and share another poll questions with you. This is in relation to your proficiency in terms of the AI technologies that I've mentioned earlier in terms of NLP, cognitive search, and machine learning. So if you're just going to rate it from 0 to 5, 5 being the highest, how would you rate your proficiency? All right, so this is very interesting results. So most of the participants mentioned 0 to 0, 1, and 2, and we have 4 responses, which says that they have 5 in terms of their proficiency. So maybe those who answered 5, this you might be actually a good addition to the team. We might want to know you. You may want to contact us on offline after this session. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, the first step to any cognitive search project is understanding the content that we are trying to automate. Now, just to give you some background on the activities behind EVA, now at the start of this project, some year and a half ago, we called upon the developers, the IT people, the operations, and IDD to a design thinking workshop to understand their requirements in terms of the content that they'll need in order for them to do their work better, in what form, in what frequency, and mode. Now, these people are actually wearing different hats within the organization, and we were able to collect and capture some of their frustration, which I mentioned earlier, as well as their insights and preferences of having this new information system. Now, the team, in particular, the developer and IT side, also had deep session on the content and the report itself. The process behind report generation, how the report is structured, how it is worded, its definition, among others. Now, with these inputs, we started ingesting the document. At first, we're working on self-evaluation reports, as this is somehow a consistent report structure. Now, by enriching, this is where we teach EVA cognitive skills. So imagine a newborn baby, for her to be able to eat. Now, we'll play as parents, so we need to teach her what's a milk, where to get it, what's its color, how frequent, etc. So, however, unlike a baby that can learn intrinsically some things by herself, EVA, on the other hand, needs to learn everything from scratch. And as she learns more and more cognitive skills are built up, then that's the time we can explore and make meaningful searches and query. Now, next slide, please, on what is EVA. Next slide. Yeah. So first, EVA can identify lessons from my corpus of documents. So this means that it's able to extract lessons coming from a particular section of evaluation documents. So with EBIS, this is done manually, and with EVA, this can be automatically generated. Now, what makes it smarter is that it can scan thousands of paragraphs and identify new lessons that have not been earlier found, hence that lesson generation feature. So for those of you who are familiar with our evaluation reports, there are actually a number of valuable lessons that have not been articulated or classified under the lesson sections of the evaluation. But EVA should be able to find these lessons. Lastly, it's able to rank which of the lessons are most important based on how they appear in various documents and based on some scores. Next slide, please. But in order for EVA to do the lesson generation task properly, it needs more data. So currently, we're looking at our samples from the EBIS database. Now, we're also working on this annotation exercise to determine whether paragraphs have lessons or not, and how to write lessons and the context behind those lessons. More on this annotation on the next, later. Next slide, please. Now, just to give you some comparison and also the researches done on text generation. So these media entities, for example, use a lot of title and article pairs. So CNN, for example, has 92,000 of these title-article pairs, and the New York Times has much, much more. Now, in our case, we're dealing with a much more sample compared to these entities. Next slide, please. Now, just to go back on that annotation exercise that I mentioned earlier and how EVA is being trained. So in order for us to have that critical mass of lessons, so we need inputs from our colleagues. So we ask our staff to annotate paragraphs, whether one, they have lessons or not, and two, if the paragraph has lesson in it, how will you rewrite or write the lessons, and what's the context behind it? Now, a working group is also to validate these annotations, and this will also ensure that quality data is fed into EVA. Now, as for the critical mass of lessons to be annotated, we are targeting at least around 2% of the total paragraphs initially identified by EVA. Now, I'll stop here, turn over the presentation to Kadra, who will speak on how EVA was developed in the context of the overall picture within ADB. And she'll give also a demo, give base on to EVA. Over to you, Kadra.
Thank you, Mike, for providing the background to EVA. And in terms of what the ask and the intended value EVA will bring. So before I jump directly into the demo itself, and yes, we're going to do it live, I wanted to quickly touch on the way that we've approached EVA. EVA was developed under the ADB Digital Innovation Sandbox, which Veronica alluded to it earlier on, where the creation of product ideas are promoted and the agility in which these sandbox initiatives are developed are constantly revisited. Generally, as a rule of thumb, the sandbox creates solutions that are not available in the market, and like EVA, initiatives that are new to ADB and our partners. These initiatives do leverage emerging technology to address pressing business needs, where often the requirements are a little fussy to begin with. So nothing really kind of concrete at the beginning. And if you take that as a backdrop, with just a little over a year, we've started with the very vague requirements. And now we have EVA in pilot testing, where it continues to evolve, learn, and gather feedbacks on what works and what needs tweaking. This means that, as Mike mentioned, EVA is still learning, and it's what we call the experimental stage, to gather feedback so that it learns from our colleagues in evaluations and operations, their inputs and experts, as they continue to evolve and become better over time. So that's a kind of a quick backdrop that I wanted to do before we delve into the demo itself. what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my video because I will struggle to do both and turn over to the screen sharing. So bear with me. So I believe you can all still see my screen. And please do let us know in the chat window if you are struggling to see anything, any of the screens that I'm presenting. So what you should be seeing on the screen now is EVA's landing page. As you can see, we've kept it very simple, a search screen that offers selection by sectors, country, theme, date range, and keyword search to enable targeted searching where required. So for this demo, what I'm going to select is governance and public sector, country, Pakistan, and theme will go with inclusive economic growth. Once, and again, we have further option to cap the search result based on date range. And for more specific keyword searches, we can further filter down the population itself. Once we click on this, once we trigger the search, EVA will search through our lessons population and return the matching hits. These lessons were first extracted as paragraphs from PDFs. They underwent transformation and load routines. We then built the data, trained the machine learning model, validated and tested multiple model performance. We then evaluated and select the best performing model, which is then used to generate the results you are now looking at. The results you are seeing uses, well, actually, maybe before we even go to the model itself, the first three results you are seeing are your must reads, followed closely by other relevant hit results. This is sorted by the relevance score based on the search criteria entered. And if we click on one of the top three results here, and we go in and we delve a little bit deep into it, what you'll notice is that the model has identified the paragraphs that's containing a lesson. Bear in mind that this is the AI model that is working to identify a lesson based on the trained data set that was fed to the model. The results, the first AI model identifies the paragraph or the individual's lessons embedded in thousands of paragraphs. And here it's checking if a lesson exists or if it doesn't exist, and then flagging it in the sense that if it's a lesson, then the AI model will pick it up and identify it correctly. The second model is looking at the paragraph that was identified as a lesson, and it will generate the lesson's title for the paragraph that was identified to contain a lesson. And then the third model will look at the lesson strength here. It will capture the occurrence of lessons. And in this example, if a lesson is repeated multiple times, it's giving an input to the user to indicate that this is something it's worth looking into. It's whether it's negative or positive, the strength of the lessons here is an additional layer to the evaluators or to our colleagues who are looking at these lessons, just to give it additional context. You will also see the relevance score and the lesson strength. We just talked about that, but the bar here will indicate the level of the strength of the lessons. As we mentioned earlier, the relevance score is based on the search criteria, entered and allocated the score based on how relevant the result fits closely to the search criteria. It goes without saying that the higher the number, the more relevant it is to the search team itself. Here we also wanted to capture related lesson. And the related lessons are not based on the initial search, but rather on the selected lessons itself. What you may have seen is when I first clicked on the first search criteria, it pulled through a lot of results. I then clicked on one of those lessons, and the related lessons is based on that. As mentioned earlier, EVA is learning from feedback provided to improve its lessons identification and title generation. For example, we are working on having an AI generated shorter lessons title. So here's a good example here. So if you look at here, we may look at this and say, okay, how can we shorten the lesson title here? And is there any way that AI can further improve the title that it automatically generated? And to help us get there, we developed an annotation tool so that EVA correctly identifies the lessons and correctly identifies the lessons that are not lessons. And a lot of it is down to, if you think of our starting point, the population of data, training data set was not sufficient to train the model itself. So what we have introduced is this annotation tool where users can provide, or the core users can provide direct feedback to how the model is performing. What we've also done is to make it easier for the annotators, because if you can imagine that EVA identifies a paragraph, so they have to determine just based on that whether this looks like a lesson. We've given them a link to the PCR or to the actual document itself, to the source document. And that document is to allow them to be able to get that context so that it allows them to be able to look at that and to be able to annotate the lessons themselves. Now that, if you look at this, these are the bulk and pieces of EVA. This is the engine behind EVA. And it's as Veronica said earlier on, we're going through a process of evolution. It's from experimentation to training, and then to the next step of fully productionizing this. What I wanted to also show you is an additional feature that we've added to EVA, which is the dashboard itself. The dashboard gives an overview of lessons activity by country, by sector, modality, theme, and year. This is an example of an implementation feature that was deemed as relevant as part of the feedback gathered from our core pilot testers. The dashboard is interactive, allowing you from a user perspective to slice and dice the views as required. We've also continued to gather additional feedback based on the continuous feedback loop that's been provided to our extended pilot group, so that we continue to identify and continue not only from a dashboard perspective, but as even from a search engine perspective, areas that EVA will continue to learn and continue to grow. To conclude, we are aiming to finalize the experimentation pilot testing of EVA by the end of November. EVA will then enter 6 months of product incubation, where we look to mature the product, solidify its security and architecture components so that it's ready for a full launch and scaling within ADB. So this is really where we are with EVA at the moment, and where we envisage we'll be there in the next 6 months or so. On that note, I will stop here and hand over to Veronica.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you, Kadra, for giving us this overview of EVA and giving us also a peek under the engine to see how it's working. I have to say that this is, of course, work in progress, and that we have weekly meetings with the IT team and the core group of evaluators, but also of persons, staff colleagues from operations, to always question ourselves, to always try to improve, to always try to make sure that we are developing the product that will be really responding to the need and the demand for evaluation knowledge. As you may have noticed, for now we are looking at a certain specific a product, which is the project completion report, which is actually self-evaluation, but we will be enlarging it to validation of it and then independent evaluation reports. And then it will be easy to identify whether the lesson comes from self-evaluation or independent evaluation, because we wanted to be inclusive and talk about evaluation in the broad sense, having self-evaluation and independent evaluation lessons brought together. So with that, actually, what I would like to do now is open the floor to our panelists to get their feedback on EVA, but also to enlarge the debate on the use of technology for better access and better use of knowledge and evaluation knowledge in particular. So for that, I would like to introduce you and welcome Edie Cheng, who is a board member at ADB and the chair of the Development Effectiveness Committee at the Asian Development Bank. So welcome, Edie Cheng. You can turn your video on. Teresa Ko is Deputy Director General of the East Asia Regional Department. To be very interesting to have her perspective as a user from operation of evaluation lessons. And I'm also very happy to welcome Oscar Garcia, who is Director of the Independent Evaluation Office at the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, and former head of the Independent Office of Evaluation in IFAD, a UN agency for agricultural development. He will bring actually the perspective of evaluators and how he thinks that artificial intelligence can be used in the field of evaluation. So welcome to our distinguished panelists. And I will start with a question to you, Edie Cheng, if you are ready to get your question.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
All right, so thank you. Edie Cheng, you, of course, you are part of the board. You represent also countries and donors and also recipient countries. So I would like to have your perspective on, first, actually the fact that evaluation is not just about accountability, which is of course of prime importance to you as board members, but also about learning. So what role do you see for evaluation lessons in general and the use of IT in an institution such as ADB, but also for governments? Because, but also access, value, and use evaluation. Your perspective on that. Your turn, your floor, Edie Cheng.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Thank you very much, Yusi, first for inviting me. I'm very happy to attend this session. Actually, I think in your opening session, you have been very clear on the logic, because ID is very important, especially for board, you see. Then this experience knowledge sharing is equally important. It's important is a mandate for ID. Then it comes to the how we can better share this knowledge, this EVA or technology is matters. But anyway, I think I will share some of my opinions from the perspective of board member and on behalf of the government side. First of all, you see, let me share some of my observations, you see, why EVA is important from the board member's perspective. First, you see, I think the most important value for evaluation by ID is independence. As board member, we really rely on ID's independent recommendations to make decisions. So by creating this EVA based on AI, I think it can further enhance the independence of the evaluation department. by unbiased data collection and utilization. Second is recently I noticed ID has been making several times recommendation by adding staff numbers for several departments or areas in ADB, including safeguard, resident mission, so on and so forth. But actually, I think even ID itself need more staffs. But the reality is we can never fill the gap. The demand for staff is always increasing. And you see, as board member, we have to control staff related to budget increase. So AI provides a good solution to address staff shortage. Third one is one common conclusion we can draw from the COVID-19 pandemic is that online digitized work will speed up. Actually, even before COVID-19, several departments in ADB had begun piloting AI. For example, Office of Auditor General, Controllers Department, Charity Department, and others. While ID is doing evaluation based on other departments' work. Naturally, ID also need to develop new tool like EVA in a context of one ADB approach to make sure the compatibility with other departments. Then fourth is, and the most important, you see, the experience and lessons sharing. Again, recently, ID published its evaluation report on PRC CPS covering 2016 to 2020. One conclusion in this report is during this CPS period, the success rate of PRC sovereign and non-sovereign portfolio is 80%. It's 11 percentage points higher than that of the rest ADB portfolio. So based on this finding, one of ID's recommendations for future PRC cooperation is to support innovative projects with high demonstration and replication value, both inside and outside PRC, and transfer the learning from this experience in a more systematic way. Maybe further information I can share here is that during the past more than 30 years, ADB had supported more than 1,200 projects in PRC, including sovereign, non-sovereign, and TA. Total amounts exceeded $40 billion. If we put all the above information together, it's quite reasonable to see there are so many experience lessons can be shared inside and outside of PRC. But you see, normal method like a seminar and trainings seems far from enough. If we count all ADB support projects to all our DMCs, we're going to be buried in data and papers. As you mentioned, you see, it's not only thousands of pages of papers. So I think this new technology like EVA becomes an indispensable tool for us. Now let me also, you see, share some of the points from the governance perspective, especially based on PRC's experience. Number one is compared with the $12 trillion economic size in PRC, ADB's 40 billion is not big, but its development impact is much, much bigger. Like you see those high standards on safeguard, on SOE reforms, governance, so on and so forth. Those are very important values that you see can benefit PRC. Also, you see huge efforts had been made by the government together with ADB to share those experiences and lessons among provinces and regions. Lots of trainings and seminars has been conducted. But still, for me, it's far from enough, especially you see when after 30 years cooperation, our operation goes down to provincial and lower level governance. So this training, so on and so forth, is more important. EVA will provide a modern way to more efficiently sharing experiences in PRC, especially when universal internet access becomes reality in PRC and maybe in other DMCs. Number two is 20 years ago, it's based on knowledge PRC learned from its cooperation with ADB and World Bank. Evaluation centers were established, both at Ministry of Finance and the local government financial department, to evaluate the performance of the government supported investment project. Now, the evaluation has been further expanded to cover all the budget expenditure, both at the central and the local government level. but how to further increase efficiency of the evaluation and better share lessons, which is area I think you see we can continue to learn from EDB, like the EVA based on AI. So in short, you see from the governance perspective, especially PRC, there is still huge potential for cooperation with EDB, especially with independent evaluation department. Veronica, I think you see, I stop here. Be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Edith Cheng. It's actually very interesting to see how you linked also the fact that we are developing artificial intelligence for evaluation as a way maybe also to develop a knowledge that will then be transferred to other countries, including to PRC. So that will be also part of the whole knowledge sharing and knowledge solution that ADB could also bring. So that was really interesting. Thank you also for highlighting element that I'm sure will resonate well with DDG Teresa, which is actually the fact that ADB is looking at improving the way it's working across all divisions. So that's what we call the one ADB. And of course, new technology can help with that. It doesn't mean that the human element is not also essential, but technology can help. Of course, the fact that we've been working for the last few months in ADB also remotely, and that we have improved a lot the way we are using new technologies to share information, and maybe actually it has been a great opportunity. So I will turn to you, Teresa, and ask about your perspective from operations. You actually are going to be the users of EVA. You know, EVA is not for evaluators. It's actually for decision makers, for operation, to access information. And accessibility is one thing, but the use of lessons is another thing. Yes. So it's also very important to have your perspective on whether first you find it useful, how you would like to be using evaluation knowledge, again, self and independent evaluation knowledge, and how you think we could improve the feedback loop that all institutions are working on to make sure that lessons from the past are actually integrated in the cycle of policy and projects so that it can really inform the future and improve. Yes.
Veronique. Okay. First of all, I also joined ED Cheng in thanking you for inviting me to this seminar, this forum. This is, as you know, my third time to join you, having joined two previous Asian Evaluation Weeks. So for the operations department, this is really, I would say, one of the best things that we could utilize as we move upstream in the process. And why do I say this? Because at the moment, when I start looking at lessons learned in project formulation or preparation, I would have to think first, okay, which countries may be relevant for my basis of comparison, and then I would have to go to the database and search for the reports. And sometimes there are good prompts that would lead me to that, but most of the time it would leave me having to look at each and every report to actually find out whether the lesson is relevant or not. EVA affords me tremendous speed actually in acquiring this information. In terms of looking at the relevance rating of each and every prompt that comes through EVA, I am prompted to then consider its potential immediately for application. And to me, this is first and foremost, I think, the most valuable tool in the future, especially when we start looking at our operations, not only from the context of innovation, but more on sustainability. Sustainability to me is a very important aspect of development, and the lessons that we can pick up on sustainability, whether they are on cost recovery, on institutional reform, and in the course of picking these up and being able to cast a very wide net in capturing these lessons learned in the process of our project formulation, specifically when we are doing concept stage formulation. That is actually, to me, one of the best values that EVA can potentially offer for operations. I stop here and let me turn back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very important actually to highlight the fact that evaluation is often seen as the end of the cycle. You know, you design the project, you implement, you even have self-evaluation, and then independent evaluation comes at the end. But actually, the way we like to see it is that it's at the end, yes, but it's also at the beginning. It's at the beginning of the new cycle. So it's very important what you were actually highlighting, Teresa, is that actually evaluation findings, lessons, should really come to inform the design stage upstream. And that's really something that we all need to work together. And translate with lessons should be better heard, better used, and better integrated in the feedback loop of operation. So Oscar, you've been leading independent evaluation departments in IFAD, now in UNDP. I know that you are of the use of technology. So your perspective on that would be really interesting. What do you think EVA can bring? Do you think actually that could be really a tool that has some value for not just ADB, but also maybe other organizations? Are there other projects that you are working on that could be of interest to our participants? So to you, Oscar, thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronique. It's a real pleasure for me to be joining this Asian Evaluation Week. Greetings from New York. Indeed, as an evaluator, I think the use of information and communication technologies for the conduct of development evaluation is extremely important. As mentioned by Cheng, the COVID-19 has also showed the importance of turning into digitalization more forcefully. And EVA has been a pioneer in the field of application of artificial intelligence in particular to the ability of evaluation offices to link better the linkage between evaluation and operations by enhancing the use of the lessons learned that you have in a repository of evaluation reports that have been conducted in the past that might still be relevant for the use in designing future operations, in this case for the Asian Development Bank. In UNDP, in the United Nations Development Program, we have a similar approach to trying to improve the use of lessons learned from our Evaluation Resource Center. It is a repository of more than 5,000 evaluation reports. It is comprised of independent evaluations as well as of self-evaluation of what we call decentralized evaluations that are being produced by more than 148 countries where UNDP operates. And therefore, it is a wealth of information residing there. But how do we improve the linkage between the lessons learned and the ability to improve the decision making? I think Cheng and also Teresa both have highlighted the importance of making that linkage much stronger and really benefiting from all the efforts that you and the Information Technology Department at ADB are doing to put these lessons available to everybody. But then how can we ensure that those lessons are really being used? In the case of UNDP, we have tried to link the lessons that we are extracting from our evaluations to the response to the COVID-19. It is precisely the time when designing new projects, new interventions, that we need to learn what happened, what worked well and what did not work well, and which were the factors that led to better performance in the past in previous crises. As such, we have extracted lessons of our support to the health sector learning from our experience with the Ebola crisis in Africa, with SARS, with H1N1, and so, but also in the field of restoring livelihoods and promoting job creation projects after a crisis, as well as what has been our experience in terms of social protection. And we have called this series Reflections. Now, those were not based necessarily on artificial intelligence. Those were done manually, but EVA was really an inspiring experience. And now we are transitioning in UNDP to try to get the next series of reflections, extracting lessons learned using information and communication technologies, and in particular, artificial intelligence. And we are now developing a partnership with Microsoft to use the Azure platform in order to move forward into that direction. As an evaluator, there is another aspect of the use of artificial intelligence that is important to us. It is for data collection and direct data collection by the use of, for example, satellite imagery that can be very useful for environmental projects where UNDP has supported the better use of natural resource management. And so using artificial intelligence for data collection is extremely important. It is also useful for data processing. And we have seen very good experiences in other organizations such as EVA of using SenseMaker and other type of tools in which artificial intelligence is being used during the process of processing the data. And finally, for disseminating better results to a much broader audience. So the use of information communication technology and artificial intelligence and machine learning can also help us in developing some predictive models. And though that predictive capacity of what happened and what worked well in the past is extremely important for improving the quality of our next operations. In that, we are following your steps in trying to have a very fruitful dialogue with our operations department so that we don't do it in isolation, but we do it collaboratively, and where the role of independent evaluation is highlighted as a key contributor to overall knowledge management in the organization to strengthen our ability to better serve the people that our organizations are expected to serve.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Oscar. Quite a lot of interesting information. It's great, and I would like to, at some point, have you maybe have a session on what you are doing on using artificial intelligence for the reflections, actually, that you are collecting. Also, very good point about the fact that, of course, here we are talking about using new technology for the dissemination of lessons, but that there is much more can be done in integrating new technology for at all the stages of evaluation.
Absolutely.
ID pioneered some of the sections, and we are learning a lot from other organizations like UNDP, like the World Bank, like other MDBs, where we exchange regularly to see actually how we can use new technology better to collect information, to improve the analysis and the implementation of evaluation. So that's definitely something I'm sure that we will see in AEW sessions in the coming years. Also, very good point on the importance of collaboration when we talk about, especially when we talk about dissemination of lessons, because it's really important to have some real ownership of operation, because and board members, because they are the users. Operation for including the lessons in the new projects, as Teresa was expressing. So board members, because they are the one also making decisions. Hopefully also government could also benefit from that. So that's the maybe long-term vision of the use of EVA. And I will now thank you for all of your comments and take this opportunity to open the floor to some questions from the audience. We already have some questions that are in my chat box. And one is actually a very important question, is just asking us to clarify the roles of each function. We have the evaluators, so IED in our case, we have operation, and we have also ITD, the technical department. So they say that actually it's clear to understand the role of IT, but what about the role of other staff? So maybe I will ask Kadra to, because I could respond to this question myself, but I will ask Kadra maybe to come in and explain how IT has been working with IED, independent evaluation, and how we are also enlarging to the rest of operation to actually ensure that there is really close collaboration. Kadra, would you be willing to come and respond to this question?
Yes, Veronique, I hope you can hear me.
Thank you. Yes, we can.
Excellent. So I think it's an important role. I think it's one of the things that we first started doing was we didn't want EVA to be purely driven by IT or to be driven by the business, because it's part, you both need the experts to interject in terms of what does the solution potentially may look like. And then the ITD, well, from the ITD, from the innovation side of things, you want to then look at it and say, what is practical? What is possible? Where is the limitation in technology? Because if we, and Veronique will probably concur with me on some of these discussions that we've had back and forth, it's there's things that they would like to include in EVA that we have to kind of push back and say, no, this is not, really, we're not there yet. And there are things that we would want to do, but again, it's, it's the focus is what makes sense for EVA at the stage that it's in, and how does that look like in terms of the roadmap for EVA moving forward? So I think it's part and parcel of the same pot. You need both perspectives. You need not only from evaluation, but you need operation as well. We need our operation colleagues to tell us what are some of the pain points and the challenges that they go through when they are designing the projects from the onset. And what is it that, how can we then incorporate that to our vision for EVA and continue to build on that? So I think for us, what has worked extremely well for us is, and especially at the pace of deliverable, is that we were so really, we were integrated into the same team. I think you will struggle to determine who was from IT, from the IT side, and who was from an independent evaluation side. And now as we open and widen the net, we are also including our colleagues from operations. And that's to me, that's the only way that I think you are able to build something that addresses from the emerging tech side, and you're able to kind of push that limitation on technology, but you also, very practical in terms of what will add value to EVA. So Veronica, I'll hand over back to you if there's anything else you want to add.
No, thank you. Kat is also talking about the role of operation, and I would actually add also the role of board. I will ask Teresa and Edith Cheng to also give their perspective on what role do they see in that they can play in developing EVA. And then I will ask Oscar also to give his perspective and his experience, because he did mention also the importance of collaboration. So maybe Teresa as the operation and the...
Sure. For us, I think we can be partners with IED at the stage of actually, right now, as Kadra mentioned, when we are actually trying to populate the system with lessons, it would be also good to get the operations perspective and for project team leaders to join in this exercise, because one is what may seem to be a lesson may not actually be a lesson to the user and vice versa. And I think by having operations staff join in the effort, one, it builds ownership, and second, it actually enhances the perspective and helps train AI, the system, to actually look not only from an evaluator's perspective, but also from an operations perspective. Having said that, I did mention to Veronique that we very much look forward to that opportunity because it is truly, I would say, it would increase the awareness of staff, and actually it could increase the take-up of usage of EVA once it is fully rolled out with the involvement of operations staff at the early stages. I stop here. Thank you, Veronique.
No, thank you very much. Definitely different perspective on what lessons are and how they can be improved, and definitely also ownership is really crucial. Thank you very much. Edie Cheng, what would be the role of the board? I hope supporting the project.
Yeah, definitely we support that. But before answer the question on the knowledge loop, you see between evaluation office and operations department, maybe I can share more information in a broader picture, because you see immediately after COVID-19, both the board on behalf of our members and you see on behalf of ADF donors, we realized ADB need to strengthen the public goods, regional public goods like public health system. So if you see colleagues ask me whether ADB is prepared for next crisis, my answer is not 100%. But board want to assure colleagues here, we have given enough attention to this issue, including this knowledge sharing. Second point is actually ID has just published your report on knowledge. The conclusion is knowledge sharing even among departments is not enough. We're not sharing our knowledge in a systematic way. That's why ADB is planning for a knowledge management action plan. So based on that, you see maybe in the future we can better share knowledge in a one ADB approach. And definitely you see how to shorten this knowledge loop. I think Garcia have provided very good answer. That is new technology like this EVA, including the AI and satellite image, so on and so forth. That I think that's the only solution for that. Thank you, Veronica. Back to you.
Thank you very much. And it's actually very important to highlight the fact that this is public good, and actually that would be the aim also of a project like EVA, is to have evaluation lessons, self and independent evaluation lessons become more of a public good. Oscar, your perspective on this role of the different, of the IT, of independent evaluation, and of the other, operations and board members.
Yes, I think we need some level of formalized approach to this, in which at any moment of important decision making, we should be resorting back to lessons learned. And that could be project appraisal committees, or at the approval of new projects by the board, that you make sure that you are really using the latest and the most relevant lessons learned for improving the quality of that decision making. And you have mentioned, Veronique, a very important feature, which is the participation of the governments, the national governments in that process. And I think one of the benefits of multilateral development organizations is precisely bringing the lessons of good practices elsewhere that can benefit a certain country. And that is part of our value added. It's a part of our value proposition, that we are bringing the latest and most relevant knowledge to address those development challenges. And therefore, I really would like to stress the importance of enhancing the dialogue with national partners, national government representatives, on sharing lessons learned from our wealth of experience in operating in so many countries. And that could be a very important link. And I am sure that operations and IT would really benefit also from that open dialogue, trying to bring what I say, the context for that lessons learned to be much more effective. Yeah, let me stop there.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Oscar. And I think it's really resonates with what Edie Cheng was saying about public good. And I have to say that it's one of the stages that we'll have to be really focusing on once EVA is developed and once EVA is reliable and used within ADB. it will be to work with operation to make sure that it's actually brought outside and that actually it's being known, because again, EVA can be part of the a solution, a knowledge solution that ADB can provide also to its government clients. So thank you very much. I'll go to another question, and one is actually about COVID-19, and Edith Cheng already started talking about it, but the question says, we are in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, so there is an immense demand for lessons to be learned, and another similar crisis may unfortunately be just around the corner. So what role do you see EVA play in shortening the knowledge loop between evaluation office and operations in times of crisis? It's not such an easy question, but it's definitely the heart of the use of artificial intelligence. So who would like to take that question about the use of EVA and shortening the loop between operation and lessons learned in times of crisis?
Maybe I can start, Veronique,
Teresa?
from my perspective, or from an operations perspective. I think, as you know, crisis response can comprise of social transfer programs. And this, I think, has received quite a wide attention during this COVID-19 crisis. It's very important for us to learn firsthand through the projects that we've done at ADB, where we have succeeded in rolling out or in joining such programs, and where we have not. And what have we learned in the process? Because, as I said earlier, we want to introduce programs that are sustainable in the long run. And if we introduce any reforms to those programs in the course of introducing our financing, we also want to make sure that we have learned from our experience and incorporate that knowledge when we are making such recommendations. So I see value in EVA to be used during these times.
Thank you. Edith Cheng or Oscar, would you like to add? I know that you have already had the fact of crisis to shorten the knowledge loop. If not, then we can actually go. There are many other questions. So one other question is about, it's more technical. It's about the cost of something like EVA. And yes, it's an expensive a device for a small organization. It's actually difficult for a small organization to develop this type of softwares. And there is a question about, is there any modest option to adopt artificial intelligence to understand lessons learned from evaluation? I can ask Kadra to try to talk about that, but I do acknowledge that we are lucky in ADB to have had this sandbox opportunity where there is actually the organization itself, the institution has put money in it to ensure that we develop innovation. Artificial that's not too expensive, that could be affordable for smaller, not shorter. So Kadra?
Sorry, I was on mute, Veronique, sorry. Yes, I think we were fortunate enough to be able to start with a small sample. Whenever you try and do something or try and introduce a new product, what you don't do is go and buy it off the shelf, because that requires a lot of heavy investment. And not only that, but sometimes what you're looking for doesn't actually exist in the market itself. So like Veronique said, we're fortunate to have the Digital Innovation Sandbox, where we can actually experiment in an iterative process, in the sense that we started off with a POC, proof of concept, where the cost was really negligible, if we can put it that way. And then we moved on to what we call a minimal value product. This means that, you know, there was already some interest from the business, and we can actually mold this into something bigger and better. And now that we have the minimal value product, and Veronica will probably at a high level share that, is now it's how do we now turn in this to a fully viable product? We know that this is wanted, this is needed, this adds additional value. Now this is where the investment comes in. So I would probably say that's probably the level of iteration that makes sense, in the sense that there has to be a demand and there has to be a need for something before you go in and invest in it. And then once you have that, the cost, a lot of the cost is really is shouldered, yes, by the sandbox, but now as we delve into other areas, you're looking at, I'll give you an example. If we're looking to develop the fully viable product, you need you need a data scientist, you need the front end and back end developers, you need people who will put on multiple hats to make this into a full-fledged product. Because we're doing it internally, actually we are keeping the cost down to a reasonable cost, in the sense that it's, I wouldn't probably ask somebody to go in and venture on their own, because there is a, just based on the comment that you mentioned, it can be very costly, especially the learning loop that goes back and forth, the time that is spent. And one of the biggest, I think, cost-related element is actually the commitment from people to really free up their time to be able to do this. Veronica, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add from your side in terms of the people cost side of things.
No, thank you very much. Yes, definitely we went very gradually. So of course, some may think that it's actually slow, but we had to be really careful and to have the proof of value, make sure that it was useful, that it was feasible. So the investment has been gradual, and it's also, yes, now that we are convinced that there is a demand, that we are convinced that it's feasible, that we can invest a bit more to make sure that it becomes actually a viable product, and a product that needs to be at a certain level before it is launched, because the worst thing that would happen would be to launch a project that's not fully cooked, because then we will lose the interest and we will lose the demand. So we are actually very careful about that. And yes, it's true that there are some costs involved, but what I would like to highlight is that actually the benefits, of course, will be, and it's a question from our friend Anas from the Islamic Development Bank, it's actually, would it be open to the public? And yes, I would hope so, is that EVA will be open for anyone to use it, anyone to actually look at the answers. And I have to share with you that my long-term vision, and I don't know whether it will be feasible or not, but the long-term vision will be to have not only evaluation lessons from ADB in this database, but maybe invite other organizations to also bring their own reports and their own evaluations, so that it will become a big database. So maybe that might be difficult institutionally, technically, but I think that would be really ideal at some point, is to have this big database of evidence-based information from evaluation that would be accessible for all. So that's answering one of the questions from Anas, but there is another one from Anas that says, actually asking whether, and that might be a question for you, Oscar, as an evaluator, how can EVA be helpful in identifying knowledge or evidence gaps and mapping evidence gaps, mapping evidence actually gaps? Maybe you can talk about it in terms of needs, and then we can actually talk about it in terms of feasibility with EVA.
Right, and it's a very good question, and related to the cost of investing into artificial intelligence or not. Nowadays, technology is more affordable, and therefore, indeed, there is an initial investment, but you need to see if you're going to use that knowledge often, then the cost diluted over time, and it may be worth taking. But if not, I think the COVID is showing us the importance of sharing knowledge with other organizations. And now that we cannot travel to many locations to conduct evaluations, we are resorting to better desk reviews, and by using the database of other institutions like the World Bank, like the Asian Development Bank, and of course we offer the repository of UNDP's evaluations to all of you as well. Now, responding to the question of Anas in terms of how to ensure that we identify knowledge gaps. Indeed, on one hand, the technology will change the way in which we conduct evaluations. And so once we start feeding into the database, we need to do a quality assurance of the data that we are putting into the system. And we will improve the quality of the data that we are gathering to have better lessons reflected. And so it has a spillover positive effect of improving the quality of data input into the system. And additionally to that, we will identify knowledge gaps, areas that are not sufficiently covered. And that can be seen more easily with the use of artificial intelligence than doing manually, and bring to the attention of the executive board or the attention of management that certain areas of investment are not sufficiently covered by evaluation evidence or evaluation knowledge, and therefore we should invest and plan accordingly. So it could be a very good tool for initiating some evaluation work. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And that question was asked also by Gordon Wanzara. So that question is actually important because it's, EVA cannot really do the mapping itself, but it will be a good source for identifying the gaps. And maybe I will turn to Edith Cheng because, you know, for board members, it's important actually to also have a clear idea of what type of information are missing. And it's important for evaluators to know what type of information board members are willing to get. So maybe EVA can help in that. It's not the only source, of course, but it could help with that. Any reaction on it, Edith Cheng, please?
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. You see, actually, I also see another question on the data collection and privacy protection. Also, this question, I can answer them together. You see, in PRC during COVID-19, this health code was issued, but also you see people was concerned about data privacy, whether their privacy can be protected. That's why you see the central government has to legally answer those questions. We have a new act to protect individuals' information. Unfortunately, one fact is developing countries, they have to learn, they have to make progress based on crisis. That means you see developed countries, why they're developed? Because they experience those crises. But for developing countries, we're not ready. So it's also how to manage this crisis by, at the same time, we can accumulate the knowledge. That's why back to ADB, back to IED, this knowledge, this policy advice is so badly needed by the developing countries. Also, you see, I think by using this EVA, as you mentioned, one of the features of the EVA is it can generate new knowledge based on current knowledge. So if you see IED, by using this EVA, they can provide policy advice before crisis for developing countries. That will be put developing countries better prepared for future crisis on force. Veronica, I know we don't have much time, but let me very briefly touch upon the cost questions you previously asked. As board member, definitely you see, my opinion is ADB, we have to spend some money on knowledge because the demand is moving to the high end. Because you see ADB's DMC is getting more and more demand compared with members of other regional or World Bank, you see other MDBs. So we have to spend some money. Second is this EVA or some of the IT might be just one-time investment, but at the same time, we're going to save a lot of money. By, for example, the traveling budget can be saved. And also this EVA will last for a long period. It's very difficult to calculate the long-term benefit versus your short-term investment. But generally speaking, I think ADB, we need gradually spend more money on knowledge, on new ITs, you see, like the EVA. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much also, Edith Cheng, for highlighting the fact that spending on this type of technology is an investment for the long term. It's not a cost in a way. So that's actually the way also, you know, some private sector companies will see it. Actually, you invest to develop more benefits and to actually increase your capacity. And that's definitely the case for when investing in innovative tools like that. Yes, unfortunately, we don't have so much time left. One last question maybe, and it might be going to my colleague, Mike. We have a colleague from IED asking, EVA can rank the importance of lessons based on frequency, but of course, it's very important to take the country context in reality. And there is a risk of lessons that are not frequently cited, but may take a backseat to lessons that are usually identified in the document. So those are the type of questions actually, Hyun, who asked the question, that we ask ourselves regularly. We have these weekly meetings, and that's exactly the type of question we ask ourselves. It's like, okay, how do we make sure, is it frequency that's important? Yeah, but what about questions that are lessons that are actually not frequent, but that are very important? So we are actually trying with IT to integrate all these elements in the system. Mike, would you want to add something on that?
Yeah, just to add, there was an earlier question about evidence gap maps. I think that would be a good addition to our lesson as an additional weight. So instead of just looking around the frequency of how often these lessons appear, we can tag it to how it is supported. These lessons are supported by evidence, and that would somehow increase its relevance and usefulness. Thank you.
Well, you see, that's actually how the team goes. That's, you know, with someone like Mike, you know, we always sees new ideas like opportunities. So now Kadra is pulling her hair thinking, okay, how am I going to do that? But it's a great idea. So I think it's going to be on the agenda of our next weekly meeting. You know, can we do that with EVA? Would it be useful? Definitely. And what would be the technical elements to make that possible? So I think that we are almost at the end of this session. We only have a few minutes left. I would like to thank our distinguished panelists for their contribution. Edith Cheng, Oscar, Teresa, thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you to all of the participants for their questions. We kept some of the questions that I couldn't ask during the session, but we have them all listed, and that will really feed our discussions, because a lot of these questions will really also make ourselves question, you know, how we can improve, continue to improve EVA. Definitely would like EVA to be a public good. It's part of developing the influence of evaluation in a good sense, so that evaluation lessons can really help improve development effectiveness. And it's actually important also to develop this culture of evaluation. And that's what also the Asian Evaluation Week is about. So thank you very much to all the panelists, to Kadra and Mike for their presentations, and to all of my colleagues behind the scene who are making these virtual sessions possible, because that's really a first. I know that at some point I was breaking up. I even dropped and came back. But you know, that's what happens when we use new technology. We're still at the beginning of it, but I think there is a lot of huge potential for the future. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to the participants and to the panelists. And we will keep you informed on the evolution of EVA. You'll hear more about us. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronique.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Veronique.
And don't forget to use the hashtag AEW 2020, and I think there would be also a survey right after this this session. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.